better.
Yeah. Maurice made a name change based, of course, on his astrological chart and things like that. And
Verdine told me, he says, had your dad lived, he said he was neck and neck with Quincy Jones. I think that was greater.
We say so.
Verdine White hated this band member. Now we know why. What seemed like a brotherly bond within Earth, Wind, and Fire was actually filled with hidden resentment and years of quiet tension.
Basically, we're a jazz band, and we converted a jazz band into a pop band, so it covers all areas.
From power struggles over leadership to bitter fights about money, creative control, Verdine felt overshadowed by Maurice's iron grip on the band.
Singer Maurice White, whose velvety smooth voice and songwriting flair powered Earth, Wind, and Fire, died Thursday after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. He was 74.
Add in unequal financial arrangements with members receiving salaries based on individual contributions, leading to feelings of resentment. And the picture isn't so perfect anymore. So, what really happened between the White brothers? Let's uncover the truth. What many people don't know is that Earth, Wind, and Fire wasn't just a famous band with big hits. It was also a family story. Verdine White and Maurice White were brothers who grew up in a close and loving musical family. They had a strong bond, but things were not always perfect between them. Maurice was the older brother and the leader.
Put a group of people together for his writing songs and discovering new musical trends and stuff like that. So that was the beginning of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
He had a big dream, and in the late 1960s, he started the band Earth, Wind, and Fire. He had the vision, the drive, and the leadership. Because of that, Maurice became the main voice behind the band's decisions. Verdine admired his older brother deeply, but as the years went by, Verdine wanted to make his own name, not just be known as Maurice's younger brother. This caused some quiet tension between them, even though they loved each other. Maurice was known for being a perfectionist. That means he wanted everything to be just right. He was also very strict when it came to how the band should sound and look. Some people called his leadership style controlling. He often made big decisions without asking others, which upset some of the members. Verdine was one of them. Even though Verdine played the bass and was one of the original members, he sometimes felt like his ideas didn't matter. He wanted to feel equal, but Maurice's strong control often left him feeling like he was standing in the background. In the 1970s, Earth, Wind, and Fire became one of the most loved and powerful bands in the world.
So basically, we're a jazz band, and we converted a jazz band into a pop band, so it covers all areas.
They had a special mix of funk, soul, and jazz that made people feel good. Their songs were full of energy, and their performances were unforgettable. But when the 1980s came, music started to change. New sounds like electronic music and pop with heavy synthesizers became popular. This brought a problem to the band. Some members wanted to stick with the old sound that made them famous, but Maurice wanted to try new things and move forward with the times. This caused arguments between members about which direction the band should go. A big moment of trouble came when Al McKay, the band's talented guitarist and songwriter, decided to leave. He wasn't just any member. He helped create some of their biggest songs, like September, and Sing a Song. His exit shocked many fans and bandmates. Al didn't like the new direction the band was taking. He was worried that they were losing their special sound by adding too many electronic elements. His departure showed that deeper problems were happening within the group. People were starting to take sides, and it was clear that not everyone agreed with Maurice's choices. Things got worse in 1983 when the band released an album called Electric Universe. This album was very different from what fans were used to. It was full of electronic sounds, heavy synthesizers, and a modern style that didn't feel like classic Earth, Wind, and Fire. Maurice believed this change was needed for the band to stay current, but many members, and even more fans, didn't like it. They felt the band had gone too far from their roots. The album didn't sell as well as their past work, and it received a lot of negative reviews. Many people felt disappointed, and some band members spoke out, saying they didn't agree with how the band had changed. The failure of Electric Universe hit hard. After its release, the band decided to take a break. This was the first big pause in their career. Maurice began working on solo projects, but the arguments about music style and leadership did not go away. When Earth, Wind, and Fire reunited later in the 1980s, they tried to mix their old style with the new sounds, but it was never quite the same. Some of the original members had already moved on, and the feeling within the group had changed. Even though they were still respected, the old unity was broken. On top of the creative problems, there were serious money issues happening behind the scenes. Maurice took care of most of the business and financial matters. While this kept things running, it also led to disagreements. Some members felt they weren't being paid fairly. Verdine, for example, felt his role in the band wasn't always properly recognized when it came to money. He worked hard, performed all over the world, and helped build the band's name, but he didn't always feel like he got the credit or the money he deserved. You might think that with all the success Earth, Wind, and Fire had, everyone in the band would be rich for life. They sold millions of records and played to sold-out crowds. But the truth is, financial problems followed them for years. Even when the band was winning awards and making hits, there were issues about who got paid and how much. A lot of the money issues were connected to royalties, the money artists receive when their music is played or sold. These payments didn't always reach the people who earned them.
Just interesting, just how great your dad was and how he just contributed to the sound of that band.
In 2012, things got even more serious when the family of Charles Stepney, an important producer who worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire, filed a lawsuit.
One of the things that I didn't know, I was doing some research that just before your father passed away, he was actually in negotiations with Michael Jackson and Barbra Streisand to work with them.
They said he never got the money he was promised. Charles helped shape the band's sound in the early years. Maurice often said Stepney was one of the main reasons the band had such a rich and beautiful musical style.
Verdine told me, he says, had your dad lived, he said he was neck and neck with Quincy Jones. I actually think his dad was greater.
We say so.
Seriously, he said,
He created some of the arrangements that made their songs so powerful. But Stepney died in 1976, and his family claimed they had never received his proper share of royalties. This lawsuit brought a lot of attention to how the band's money had been handled over the years. People began to wonder, if someone as important as Stepney didn't get paid, were there others too? The case made old problems come back to the surface, and Verdine, who had become more involved in running the band after Maurice was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, found himself in the middle of it all. He had to deal with questions about where the money went, who was paid, and what mistakes had been made.
The illness kept White from touring with Earth, Wind, and Fire since 1994, though his presence could be felt through his younger brother Verdine, who remains with the band.
This wasn't the first time Earth, Wind, and Fire faced money troubles. Over the years, there had been quiet whispers about disagreements, lawsuits, and members leaving under unclear circumstances. Often, the problem came down to money. In the music industry, this is sadly common. Many talented people don't get what they deserve because of bad deals or poor management. Earth, Wind, and Fire was no different. Their music brought joy to millions, but behind the stage lights, real-life struggles were always there. Even today, the story of Earth, Wind, and Fire is not just about music. It's about family, leadership, dreams, disagreements, and trying to hold something special together while dealing with fame and business. Verdine and Maurice loved each other deeply, But like many families, they also had their share of pain. What they built together will never be forgotten, but the truth behind their success includes both bright moments and shadows. During the 1970s, Earth, Wind & Fire was at the peak of its success, dominating the charts with hit after hit. As the band's fame skyrocketed, so did their expenses. Elaborate stage productions, flashy costumes, and high-end recording sessions all added up. Maurice White, the band's leader, had a grand vision for Earth, Wind & Fire that went beyond just making music. He wanted to build an empire, which included launching his own record label imprint and constructing a massive studio complex where the band could produce their music independently. While these ideas were ambitious, they also put a heavy financial strain on the group's resources. One of the key reasons for the financial troubles was the lack of proper oversight. In many cases, musicians trust business managers and accountants to handle money matters. But without strict supervision, things can spiral out of control. The music industry in the 1970s was notorious for artists being underpaid, misled, or outright cheated out of their earnings. While Earth, Wind & Fire was making millions from album sales, touring, and merchandising, it wasn't always clear where all that money was going. Reports surfaced that the band's finances were in trouble despite their commercial success. Some members later admitted that they weren't fully aware of how their earnings were being handled, which led to serious tensions within the group. Maurice White's passion for expanding Earth, Wind & Fire into more than just a band was admirable, but it may have contributed to the financial difficulties. He invested heavily in his Kalimba Productions label, hoping to discover and produce new talent. But running a label is a costly business, especially when managing a band as large as Earth, Wind & Fire. By the late 1970s, these financial strains became more apparent. Although the band continued to sell records and perform sold-out shows, behind the scenes, money troubles were mounting. The combination of extravagant spending, poor financial management, and risky business ventures created a situation where even one of the biggest bands in the world wasn't immune to money problems. Ultimately, these financial difficulties would set the stage for internal conflicts that would carry over into the 1980s, affecting both the band's creative direction and its lineup. What happens when the person holding everything together starts to fall apart? That's what happened with Maurice White, the man behind the powerful sound of Earth, Wind & Fire. He brought joy to millions, but behind the scenes, he carried a heavy burden. Fame isn't always fun. There's pressure to stay on top, to keep smiling, to keep working. But when your body starts to fail and your world begins to change, even the strongest person can struggle.
The illness kept White from touring with Earth, Wind & Fire since 1994, though his presence could be felt through his younger brother Verdine, who remains with the band.
In the early 1980s, Maurice started noticing something strange. His hands were shaking just a little, barely enough to worry anyone else. Sometimes his fingers felt stiff, like they didn't want to move the way he wanted them to. At first, he didn't tell anyone. He thought maybe he was just tired. Touring all the time, performing night after night, it takes a lot out of you. He thought a little rest might help, but deep down, he was worried. As time passed, things got worse. The shaking in his hands happened more often. Simple things like playing an instrument or moving his hands smoothly became difficult. Maurice was famous for playing the kalimba, a small African thumb piano that made beautiful spiritual sounds. But now, even that felt like a challenge. His once strong voice, the one that led so many hit songs, started to sound shaky. Something was definitely wrong. Maurice finally went to the doctor. He had tests done, and the news wasn't good. He had Parkinson's disease, a sickness that slowly takes away your ability to move and control your muscles. It doesn't get better. It only gets worse over time. For someone like Maurice, whose life was built around music, movement, and performance, it felt like a cruel joke. But Maurice wasn't someone who liked to show weakness. He didn't want anyone to feel sorry for him. He didn't want the band's success to be overshadowed by his illness. So he kept it to himself. He didn't tell the public. He didn't even tell many people in the band. He worked hard to hide the signs. He changed the way he performed. He gave more responsibility to others. He stopped doing things that would make his symptoms obvious. But no matter how hard he tried, Parkinson's kept getting worse. By the 1990s, he couldn't keep going. His movements were stiff. His voice was weak. He had no choice but to step away from the stage. At the same time, Maurice's brother Verdine was going through his own struggles. Verdine loved his brother and the band, but being both a bandmate and a caregiver was hard. Watching someone you love slowly change and suffer is painful. Verdine tried to support Maurice while also keeping the music going, but it wasn't easy. There were times when emotions got too strong. They didn't always see eye to eye. Communication broke down, and frustration built up. Even though the public saw two brothers standing strong together, behind closed doors, things were tense. Verdine hinted in some interviews that working with family had its challenges. Sometimes personal disagreements turned into problems in the studio. Being family didn't always make things easier. It often made things more complicated. Still, when Maurice's health got worse, Verdine tried to make peace. He spoke often about how much he respected his brother's vision and wanted to protect the legacy they built together. One thing that also added to the stress was Maurice's strong opinion on music trends, especially disco. Even though Earth, Wind and Fire had huge disco hits, Maurice didn't really like the genre. He felt it was too simple, too loud, and didn't have the musical depth he believed in. But in the late 1970s, disco was everywhere. If you wanted to stay popular, you had to join in. So even though Maurice wasn't a fan, the band still made some disco-style tracks, including Boogie Wonderland. Maurice had actually written Boogie Wonderland for another group, but the band decided to keep it. Not everyone was happy about it, but the song was a hit. It had all the parts of a disco song: the beat, the strings, the energy. But Maurice and guitarist Al McKay made sure it had something extra. They added wild sounds like horns, timpani drums, a harpsichord, even triangle dings. They blended samba and bossa nova rhythms to make it different. It was fun, over the top, and complicated. Even the lyrics weren't just about partying. The song talked about using dancing as a way to hide pain. It showed both the fun and the sadness behind the disco scene. When Philip Bailey sang the high notes and the violins soared in the bridge, it felt like a mix of joy and sorrow. The song became a classic. It helped their album, I Am, go multi-platinum and earned Maurice a Grammy nomination as Producer of the Year. But disco didn't last. Soon, the backlash came and the music industry turned away from it. Many artists who went full disco couldn't recover. Then, after their album Electric Universe flopped, Maurice made a sudden decision. He announced that the band was taking a break. No warning, no group vote, just his decision. It shocked everyone. The band members were heartbroken. Earth, Wind, and Fire was their life, their dream. Now it was gone. There was no plan for what came next. Philip Bailey later said it felt like a nightmare. Some members lost everything: their homes, their savings. They didn't know how to move on.
I was going through some serious stuff, and the show must go on. You got to do your gig and stuff.
Even Maurice's family life took a hit. His relationship with Verdine became strained. Their brother Freddie had already left the group earlier. The damage was deep. Ralph Johnson, one of the band members, later said the break was painful. They had built something amazing together, and it felt like it was torn away in an instant. There was no goodbye, no proper ending, just silence. Maurice had a powerful vision. He created one of the greatest bands of all time. His music touched hearts all over the world, but the same passion that built Earth, Wind, and Fire also brought stress, tension, and personal pain. His illness made it even harder. Parkinson's disease changed his life forever. Still, he kept fighting. He kept creating. Even when he could no longer perform, he found ways to contribute behind the scenes. Philip goes solo. What happens when a band member wants to shine on his own? That's what Philip Bailey, one of the lead singers of Earth, Wind, and Fire, started to feel deep inside. He loved being part of the group, but he also had dreams of doing his own music. He wanted to make a solo album and hoped that Maurice White, the band's leader, would support him. Philip looked up to Maurice and trusted his musical skills. So when Maurice agreed to produce his solo album, Philip was excited. He believed this was his big chance to step out and show the world what he could do on his own. But things didn't go the way Philip hoped. While Maurice said yes to helping with the album, he was also very busy with other music projects. He was working with other artists, doing studio work, and running things behind the scenes. This made Philip feel like his solo album wasn't really important to Maurice. He started to think Maurice didn't really want to help him grow outside the group. To Philip, it felt like Maurice wanted to stay in control and keep all the power in his hands. It was a tough thing to feel, especially coming from someone he respected so much.
It's a team, and I have a part to play, very distinctive part. But it doesn't offer me the full range of what I can do musically.
Even with all these problems and disappointments, Philip never stopped respecting Maurice. He always gave credit to Maurice for creating the sound and style that made Earth, Wind, and Fire so special. Philip once said, "You can't play Earth, Wind, and Fire songs without Maurice's presence being in it." That one sentence says a lot. It means that even though they had disagreements, Philip knew how much Maurice mattered to the music. Maurice was the heart of the band in many ways. His ideas, his vision, and his leadership shaped everything. Philip could see that clearly. In the early days of the band, when they were just starting out in Los Angeles, they worked with a big company called Warner Brothers Records. At that time, they had someone very important in their corner, Perry Jones. Perry was more than just a helper. He was like a guide for them. He worked closely with the band and helped them deal with the music company. He also gave advice to Philip and helped him grow as an artist. Perry became very close with Maurice too. In fact, he even lived in Maurice's home for a while. That's how close they all were. But things changed when the band decided to leave Warner Bros. And sign with a new company called Columbia Records in 1972. With the new deal came new people to manage the group. That meant Perry's job was no longer needed. It was a painful moment for everyone. Perry had been with them from the start and had done so much to help. But sometimes, in music, business decisions have to be made. Even though it hurt, they knew it was the best move for the future. Philip wrote in his book, Shining Star, that he felt very sad about losing Perry. He hoped they would reconnect someday. Jessica Cleaves. One of the new things Maurice did was add a female singer, Jessica Cleaves. This made the group stronger in vocals because they now had 3 singers. Jessica had a beautiful voice, and at first, things seemed good. But soon, there were problems. Jessica began missing shows and wasn't always around when the band needed her. On top of that, she was struggling with substance use. These issues made it hard for her to stay part of the team. Still, Philip had a lot of love for her. He said, "Everybody loved Jessica like a sister. She was the sweetest person with those beautiful eyes and her amazing voice." Philip was truly sad that it didn't work out with her in the band. Maurice, on the other hand, wasn't as emotional about Jessica leaving. In his book, My Life with EF, he said Jessica wanted to live with her new husband in Kansas. He also said her struggles with drugs would have made it difficult for her to stay in the band. After she left, Maurice made another decision. He said the band would no longer have a female singer. From then on, Earth, Wind, and Fire would only have male voices,